IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Is that Trevor Trowbridge and his new setup for his new office? There we go. All right, got that new apartment moved in, got the new office set up, and we're ready to talk some Notre Dame football. To begin, man, Trevor, how are you, buddy? I know it's been kind of a crazy week for you, but you still answer the bell. You're showing up every day and ready to talk some Notre Dame football, man.
We're ready to go, Brian. Happy to be in here. New office is set up. Feels good. Got the Notre Dame decor up behind me in a better apartment. So really excited. Happy to talk some ball today, man. Ready to go.
Well, today we're going to talk about several topics. I'm going to briefly touch on the Deuce Knight situation very briefly, and then we're going to move on to things I actually care about, which is the Notre Dame football team and the Notre Dame defense. Today we're going to talk about kind of where the defense is right now, Trevor, and can it get better in the second half of the season, and will it get better? And if it can, what are the reasons why we think that? And if it doesn't, what are the concerns that we have that may prevent it from doing that? And then around 2:15 or so, I'm going to be joined by my guy, Bill Bender, and Bill and I know we're not making any predictions today, Trevor, you and I, because Notre Dame doesn't play today. I'm positive that Notre Dame won't lose this weekend, and that's the important thing. But we're gonna talk about, Bill and I are going to preview the weekend's games. We're actually going to go through a lot of different games. We're going to talk about both Friday night games, which involve a ranked team. We're going to talk about Tennessee, Arkansas, Michigan, Washington, SMU, Louisville, Iowa, Ohio State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and of course, the game that matters most probably to Notre Dame fans, or most Notre Dame fans, is Missouri at Texas A&M. So that will be on the docket for the second part of the show. But of course, the first part of the show, Trevor, we're going to dive into the Notre Dame defense. So I'll just say this from the outset. I'm not going to waste really any time talking about Deuce Knight today. If you all want to talk about Deuce Knight, that's fine. Tomorrow we got a mailbag, and you can ask all the Deuce Knight questions that you want. I'm not going to take a whole segment away. You all knew, if anyone that's a member of the message board is known for about 2 months, that Deuce isn't picking Notre Dame. And so that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And honestly, we've wasted enough time talking about Deuce Knight on this channel. And, he made his decisions for whatever reasons he made his decisions and acted the way he acted during this process. That's on him. And that's not on Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not to blame for why Deuce Knight picked another school. They did everything they could possibly do. And, so I just, I don't really want to waste time on it, Trevor. He decommitted. Notre Dame has known this is the most likely option for a while. They kept battling. Kudos to them for that. People have said, why didn't you drop him? And then you wasted all this time to find other quarterbacks. Trust me, they have been working on other quarterbacks for a little bit now. So this isn't a thing where Notre Dame got, gee, we're so shocked. We thought we were going to keep him in the class. We had no idea. That's not the case. They've known about this. They battled and did in the way that they needed to. And he made the decision despite saying things to the contrary, and it is what it is. So, yeah, so I'm kind of over it, and I have no desire to really talk about it, to be honest with you. If you guys want to talk about it in the chat, tomorrow's the perfect day for that, because if it's a topic of conversation, because here's the thing, just because I don't want to talk about it doesn't mean you all in the chat don't want to talk about it. And so that's fine. That's fair. I'm not saying y'all can't talk about it. I'd rather you not dive into it in the chat today, because we're going to be talking about other things. But tomorrow, if you guys want to ask Deuce questions, feel free to ask Deuce questions. If you're someone on the message board, I would encourage you to go read the intel piece I dropped last night, because that's probably going to answer most of your questions. And of course, we can chat about it there. But Trevor, I actually care to talk about the Notre Dame defense, because that's actually something that that kind of matters to me and something I'm interested in. So let's talk about the Irish defense. And when we talked about the offense, it was about, okay, looking forward to the rest of the season on that side of the ball, and concerns we have and things we like. And when you look at the defense, obviously the defense is in a much better place than the offense is, because the defense has honestly been one of the best in the country so far this season. It's been a really outstanding group. It's been a unit that, for the most part, has allowed this team to go out there and has been I should say it hasn't allowed the team, but it's been the fuel behind Notre Dame being as a 4-1 football team and a top 15 team that's capable of going out there week after week and winning football games here recently. So certainly something to look at and be kind of fired up about. Trevor, the stats back all that up. If you look at the Fermo Efficiency Index, Notre Dame has the number 3 defense in the country when you take all the criteria, the context of who they've played and how they've played. The only two defenses ahead of them are Georgia and Alabama. I would argue that Georgia's defense should not be ahead of Notre Dame's, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But it's been the strength of this football team through the first 5 games of the season. But Trevor, I don't know that we can look at it with everything that's happened and say they're going to remain exactly what they are now because of injuries, but also youth and other things. I could actually see it getting better, and we'll dive into reasons why. But I could also see it maybe taking a little bit of a step back, and we'll get into some of the reasons for that as well. But the reality is so far this season, Trevor, this defense has been, as a whole, as good as advertised. Maybe some players haven't been as good as we hoped. Other players have been better than we think. Younger players have been ascending so far. But at the end of the day, when you break down this Notre Dame defense, Trevor, it's been outstanding once again. And once again, they're one of the nation's best units.
Through the first 5 games, they are who we thought they were, which is really comforting to say. With Notre Dame getting a new offensive coordinator and another transfer portal quarterback, there was going to be some sort of adjustment with the team. And as a head coach, it's got to be comforting knowing that one of the steady, consistent parts of your football team as a whole is your defense. And from the looks of everything so far, they're picking up right where they left off last year, which is awesome. One thing that you and I sit down and talk about and evaluate is no signs of regression and making sure that they can build upon what they have. So Notre Dame's defense is doing a really good job of that so far. But as you alluded to, there are some things that might potentially get in the way of that, but there's also a lot of room for excitement with the young athletes that they have on this team. So I'm excited to jump into it with you today, Brian, and start talking some Notre Dame defense, man.
Yeah, the big thing, Trevor, when you look at this group is one of the concerns I had was coming in was the combination of a lot of veteran players with a lot of younger players. How would that blend together? And honestly, so far, I think it's actually blended pretty well. But it's been the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I thought early in the season it would be the veterans that would be playing the best football. And then as the season wore on, the younger players would start to ascend and make more plays. But if you really look at it, a lot of the veterans outside of Xavier Watts have maybe not quite been what we had hoped that they would be. And the one veteran that and Xavier's been excellent. I mean, he's playing I think as an all-around player, I think he's better this year than he was last year. We broke that down a little bit yesterday. But outside of Jordan Patelho, I would argue that the veterans have underachieved. I mean, we kind of expected a little bit with Jack Kaiser because he was making a transition to a new position. So we knew that there'd be some growing pains there. Howard Cross and Riley Mills are coming off their best game of the year, but if you're evaluating the entire performance, they've underwhelmed the first 5 games. Benjamin Morrison's been good this year, but he hasn't quite been at his best, right? Like, I think that's you got to be careful what you say there, because some people, because he hasn't been like, oh my gosh, he's the best cornerback in college football, it's like, well, he's been disappointing. No, he hasn't been disappointing. He's still been very good, but maybe not quite as good as he's capable of as he shakes off the rust from being out for several months because of the shoulder injury. And RJ Oben hasn't panned out like we'd hoped he would. Rod Hurd has been slow to get comfortable in the Notre Dame defense. So I would say outside of maybe Jordan Clark, Xavier Watts, and Jordan Patelho, the veterans have actually not played great football so far this season. It's actually been the young guys that have made a lot of the plays. When you look at Christian Gray and Don Schuler, Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliama-Asa, brought Boubacar Traore before his injury. And you look and say, boy, it's actually the young bucks that have been performing well. So what is that going to mean for the second half of the season? We'll kind of talk about that. But that's if you talk about what has been a surprise so far this season, I think it'd be that. Because if I'd have told you before the season that the majority of the veteran players are going to come out of the gate slow for the first 5 games, I don't know if I would look at it and say, yeah, Notre Dame's going to have the number 11 scoring defense in the country through 5 games, playing the teams that we knew they were going to play. And that's been a little bit of the surprise for me, Trevor. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I'm relatively in the same boat as you. And the way that I look at it, I'm pretty happy let me tailor that. I am happy that the young guys are playing as well as they are, because we'd be having a whole different conversation during the first bye week if the veterans were having the inconsistent play that they were having and the young guys weren't there to kind of back that up and contribute to the defense the way that they are, right? Excuse me. So I think, and I know we're going to dive into it here soon, but it leaves a lot of room for, not only are these younger players going to continue to ascend in Notre Dame's defense, now the veterans that we were talking a lot about in the offseason also have room to continue to get going. And it's nice saying that Notre Dame has the 11th scoring defense in the country right now, and not all 11 guys are playing their highest level of football right now.
No.
So that leaves a lot of room to talk about how high truly is the ceiling for Notre Dame's defense.
Right.
And that's an exciting conversation to have, man.
Right. It's also kind of, I don't want to say, I'm trying to think of the right word to say here, Trevor, not nerve wracking, because it's not that, but unknown. I do think there's a little bit of a, yes, the defense can get a lot better. And I think that it will, based on Al Golden's track record. Because even if you go back to 2022, they were better in the second half of the year, much better in the second half of the year, in my opinion, than they were in the first half of the year. And it's not just because, Ohio State wasn't on the schedule, because actually they played pretty well against Ohio State. That was one of the early games where I felt the defense was at its best. But when you go back to 2022 and you look at some of the inconsistencies they had, not finishing the Marshall game off, not finishing off North Carolina, I felt later in the year, I mean, they were very good against UNLV. UNLV got scores late. It was the offense that was a problem against UNLV. They were very good against Syracuse. Syracuse put a garbage touchdown on the board in that game. Dominated Clemson. It was 28-0 at one point in time. The second half of Navy was weird, but, but the offense didn't help them out, and then they blew out BC. And I actually thought the defense played pretty well against USC, considering all the things they were missing. And they lost that game because Caleb Williams basically just kind of put on a Superman cape on that game and was like, I'm going to win the Heisman today, which he did. You know what I mean? And then they went out in the bowl game and had a couple spots. But like they didn't give up 38 points on defense in the bowl game. They had 2 pick sixes in that game. You know what I mean? And then they had another short field off of an interception. So the defense actually played relatively well that game. So I thought they finished strong on defense. And then you look at last year, I think the Clemson game was a little bit of an anomaly, but I thought the defense was great second half of the year outside of the Clemson game. They were great against USC, great against Pitt, great against Wake Forest, completely shut down Stanford when it mattered, and then, of course, played great in the bowl game. So this has been a second half team under Al Golden. And so that's the reason for optimism for me. But because of the unique nature of the makeup of the team, you don't know that the veterans are going to ascend, and we don't know that the freshmen aren't going to descend, which we'll talk a little bit about. But the other part too is there's been some injuries racked up, and I know we'll dive more specifically into it, Trevor. But that's the other thing is when you look at this team, is the depth chart is a little bit, okay. I think they're still going to be okay, but there's some questions to answer. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is just I'm not. It's not even a concern, because I know we'll get into areas for concerns. It's not even concerns. It's just more of an unknown of what direction they're going to go, because there is that chasm between, okay, there's a bunch of 5th and 6th year guys over here, and then a bunch of freshmen and sophomores over here, and then like Benjamin Morrison right in the middle. You know what I mean? Because he's like the only like junior that's playing a bunch. Everybody else is like a 1st or 2nd year guy. I think it's like him and Donovan Heinisch, I believe, are like the only guys left in that class that are playing a lot, right? I mean, Jalen Sneed plays, but he doesn't play a lot.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go look at that class, because I don't know that there's a lot of guys from that class playing a bunch, because Josh Burnham's been hurt, right? And you hope to have him back. And if he comes back, that'll help. But when you look at that, Jaden Mickey transferred out. That was a guy that was playing a lot of football for them. Tyson Ford's and Aiden Gobira are no longer on the team. Junior Tuilamaka is now starting to ascend. Yep. Right. But we'll see if he can continue it. But like, it's just like a bunch of older guys and then a bunch of really young guys and like a couple guys right in the middle. Right. But it's predominantly one of those two groups. And that makes it intriguing when you project forward, because we don't necessarily know which direction both sides are going to go. And I think that adds to some of I'll say intrigue. That's a great word for it, Trevor. I'm trying to think of like the way, because I don't want it to sound like I'm nervous about it, because I'm not nervous about it. It's more so, it's just intriguing because it could stagnate. I mean, this is obvious. They could stagnate and just play this way the rest of the year, which is, again, pretty good. You know what I mean? They could descend and, a couple more injuries, and all of a sudden they can't overcome those as the schedule ramps up a tad offensively for the offenses they're going to face. Or they could really take off. And then what degree is the dissension if they have a dissension? What degree is the takeoff? But the interesting thing is, unlike last year, where the defense was just about, you got to figure a couple things out, it was like it's what they were. Even though I thought they were better over the second half of the year, it's not like they weren't also very good in the first half of the year. I mean, they were very good in the first half of the year. But I just thought they took some things. Like, I thought the run defense got better second half of the year. I thought they got more disruptive in the second half of the year. But their results were really good all year, right? Where this defense, I think, has a chance to actually do more movement one way or the other than because last year's group, once they found their groove, it was a bunch of 5th and 6th year seniors outside of, again, Benjamin Morrison, and you just kind of knew this is who they are. And it's pretty good, but that just, that's who they are. This group does have a chance to get significantly better. Doesn't mean that they're going to. And I think that's the adds to there's a little bit more intrigue when looking at the defense now than where I was last year. And I mean, so when you and I were talking about before the show, Trevor, we're looking at different aspects of it, saying man, this is going to be interesting. And boy, this could end up being really good, but there's always that but it could also, there's still some questions. So I'd say it's intrigue, and there's maybe more questions surrounding the defense heading into the second half this year than maybe there was last year, where it was a pretty established group of players.
I agree. I think it makes me a little bit anxious because, to your point, I don't think nervous is the right word. Truly, I don't believe that Notre Dame's defense is going to descend any, if at all. But if they do, and I know we're going to go over some of the areas where they might potentially, I think it is honestly the inconsistencies on offense that make me a little bit anxious with what happens with the defense, because the defense has been that constant. No matter what happens with the offense, we've always been kind of be able to hang our hat on, the defense has got us. The defense got us. It'll dig us out of this hole, right? Whereas now, with some of the injuries, with just the diversity in age of who's on the defense, it's a little bit more of a question now. I don't think that means it's going to be poor. I don't think that it might look a little different, but based on what the numbers tell us through the first 5 games, even with playing a good amount of young guys, especially in their highest ranked matchup of the season, this defense is still going to be really good. So, like I said, overall, just anxious to see what the next, especially 3 games, are going to look like, as you have guys coming back, you have some that will be out, getting younger guys in a groove. So, interested to see what that looks like.